Welcome to Not the Top 20 podcast. These are our 1 to 24 predictions for the Sky Bet Championship 2025-26 season. George and I have correctly predicted 5 of the last 6 championship title winners, and we'll do so again. Just you wait and see. But before we get the crystal ball out, as is tradition, George, the 1 to 24s come with the reveal of this season's NTT20 title sponsor, and it's a big one.
Yes, that is right. Welcome to Not the Top 20, brought to you in association with Sky Bet and the Sky Bet EFL Building Foundations Fund.
The Sky Bet EFL Building Foundations Fund is a joint initiative between Sky Bet and the EFL, and it awards grants to EFL club charities to spend on a wide range of community projects and initiatives. Launched in 2023, the fund has already given away over £2 million as part of a £6 million commitment over 6 seasons.
And we'll be travelling around the country to shine a light on some of the amazing initiatives made possible thanks to the Sky Bet EFL Building Foundations Fund, and we cannot wait to get on the road.
Otherwise, more of the same. Our regular content will not change one bit. The same EFL coverage that you've enjoyed now for the best part of a decade. Can you believe it? Let's crack on with the championship predictions.
So, as is customary in these 1 to 24s, they're actually 24 to 1s. Badly named. We talk about the team who are going to finish in 24th. And normally, this is a bit of a sad moment because we don't want to do this. We don't want to burst the bubble of a certain team who are looking forward to the season coming up. But this year is a bit different because we have Sheffield Wednesday in 24th. And for once, I think everyone would agree that it's hard to see why they wouldn't be there given the off-field issues.
Yeah, because if you look at last season's league table, you've seen Wednesday finished in 12th. But as you will almost certainly have seen or heard or read, it's been a horrendous, chaotic summer, and things are, as we record, seemingly still getting worse for Wednesdays. They are, among other things, under a number of embargoes because of financial issues, including players having been paid late in both May and June. The owner, Dejphon Chansiri, has said that he is looking to sell the club, but again, as we record, nothing seems forthcoming on that front. And very clearly, his ability to fund the club has more or less evaporated. And the squad, the coaching staff, has been completely decimated. Danny Röhl left this week. 4 other coaches have left. And one of them, Henrik Pedersen, will be the new manager and will take Wednesday into the new season. The 9,000 capacity North Stand has been closed due to safety concerns with just a few weeks until their first home league game. And most of the squad has left as well. Now, the next payday is on the day that this podcast comes out, and we have no idea what will happen. Even if a sale is pushed through, the effects of this summer, George, are going to last a very, very long time. Obviously, we're really just focusing on one season here for the predictions. But let's be clear, this is a football club in crisis.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest concern is whether or not they can actually complete the season and whether or not they can actually field a team for opening day against Leicester, because at the time of recording, that doesn't seem a given, and especially because Chansiri seemingly wants a ridiculous amount of money for a club with very few assets and a dilapidated stadium. It feels unlikely that a deal is going to go through. I mean, if we look at this from a purely footballing perspective, let's look at the players who have left. Josh Windass has gone to Wrexham, Callum Patterson's gone to MK Dons, Gassama's gone to Rangers, Masaba's gone, Wilkes has gone, they've both gone to Turkey, Michael Smith and Paul Valentin have gone to Preston, Ihikwe's gone to Blackpool, Fanwo has gone to Hull. Then you've got Marvin Johnson without a club, Stuart Armstrong without a club, Barry Bannon without a club but training with them still, as he clearly is desperate, you would think, to stay at the club if at all possible. There are good players still there. Deshaun Bernard, Dominic Iorfa, Liam Palmer, Piers Charles, their young keeper. But the assumption in the report seems to suggest that the wages are unlikely to be paid this month, in which case we will surely see mass action being taken by these players. So, we have no idea what kind of shape Sheffield Wednesday will be in for opening day. And right now, it feels so unlikely they're going to be able to field a team of championship quality. And I would almost say at this stage, the best case scenario would almost be that they're able to somehow get through the season, even in 24th, if they come out the other end with the new owner in place and some kind of stability. That means that next season we'll be talking about them again in our 1 to 24s, because right now it's a club in crisis without any end in sight.
Just feel terrible for Wednesday fans at the moment, should be excited heading into a new football season, and instead are worrying about the very existence of their club In 23rd place, we've got Hull City. Now, Hull finished 21st last season, just above the dotted line. And not long after that, Ruben Sayas was sacked. He did about 6 months in charge. He kept them up. The results improved to a certain extent. The performances improved to a certain extent. And he did keep them up. He's now the Sheffield United manager, who are gunning for promotion in the same league. He's been replaced by Sergej Jakirovic. Now, this is a manager with a very good record in Bosnia, in Croatia, had a short spell in Turkey last season, and also had pretty good results. I assume that's where he'd have been flagged up onto the radar of the Hull City owner. But on a smaller scale to Wednesday, they've also had a pretty chaotic summer, and that seems to be a bit of a theme of Hull City over the last few seasons. They were also placed under an embargo that would mean that they're not able to pay a fee for a player until January 2027 because of late payments to clubs for previous transfer payments. Now, those payments were settled quite quickly afterwards, so they are able to sign frees and loans, and they're appealing against that ban on paying fees for players. But at the moment, that hasn't been lifted, and at the moment, it's been another messy summer at Hull City, in my opinion. They've lost a couple of centre-backs, a couple of senior centre-backs in Alfie Jones, who's gone to Borough, and McLaughlin, who's gone to Blackburn. They had quite a few loanees last season who contributed to a decent end to the season, who are no longer there, like Gelhard, for example. And they've added Shemi Ajayi, Akin Famuo, who are solid defenders for Championship level when they can stay fit, and both of them have had issues on that front. Dylan Phillips joins the goalkeeping ranks, and Joel Ndala on loan from Manchester City is hopefully as talented as getting a young wide player on loan from Manchester City suggests. But one feature from last season was insane luck with injuries, bad luck rather than good luck. ACLs all over the show in this whole squad. And so I'm hopeful that we might see some comebacks from players like Balumi, who looked really exciting before his injury, like Liam Miller, who looked really exciting before his injury, like Elliot Matasso, who joined in January, who looked interesting before his injury. But they all start the season missing. Jakirovic is clearly an unknown, and we like to give managers the benefit of the doubt, and there's absolutely no doubt that he has had a very good record pretty much wherever he's been. But Shota Arveladze, disastrous appointment. Tim Walter, disastrous appointment. The track record of the owner is not good on this front. And I think, given that we both rate Ruben Sayas very highly, this is more likely than not to be a downgrade on what they had before. It's another summer window which has been arduous at best. And if you squint, there's a starting 11 that's fine, but this is not a strong squad. There is not much depth here, and very little proven consistent quality as well. For me, a 23rd place finish in relegation to League One reflects that I think this club has been mismanaged, basically, in footballing terms, in pretty much every way, when it comes to appointments, when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to chopping and changing constantly. I don't have much trust in those running the club to make a better fist of things this season, and I think it's a poor squad. So that's the sort of thing that impacts club culture and atmosphere and togetherness. I'm really down on Hull at the moment. I think the owner has talked a lot of talk and in absolutely no way walked the walk. So Hull City, we think, relegated 23rd in the Championship.
Can we fast forward this bit?
Isn't it?
So, disclaimer for those who don't listen to us often, I am an Oxford fan, and we normally get criticism at this point around having Oxford too high. That was the case when
You really think Oxford are going to stay up in the Championship?
Season,
it's a different ball game, this, lads. Don't worry about that.
The season before, we had them in the top 6 after finishing, 20th?
Yeah, where did they finish?
5th.
Nice, good prediction, that.
But this time, we've got them in the relegation zone. Now, this is difficult because I'm not overly pessimistic about our chances this year. And I think if you look for reasons to be optimistic, they're very obvious. Like Gary Rowett has an incredible track record at Championship level of working with teams with low budgets and not only delivering safety, but with Millwall delivering like consistent mid-table finishes on the fringes of the playoffs. Mm-hmm. If you look at Oxford's points tally under Rowett for the back end of last season, we were 7th or 8th. And in terms of outgoings, apart from Ben Nelson, who was very good but spent a lot of last season injured, and Ruben Rodriguez, who was good but was a bit part player, we haven't really lost any players. And in Brian de Keersmaker have broken a club record, who looks like a serious player from Heracles
Is the club record most amount of letters in a player name?
Yes. Fee, I should have said.
A record fee.
Brodie Spencer comes in a right back, who is a real talent. Jack Curry, who had such a good loan last season at Leyton Orient, comes in at left back. So that's 3 positions in the pitch where we've strengthened. Mm-hmm. The reason with these 1-24s, you're looking at like the most likely cases of where teams are going to finish as like a kind of a middle line. And with us, I think we know we have one of the lowest budgets, and there were huge red flags in the underlying numbers at the back end of last season, where yes, the results were good, but we were still projecting as the second worst team in the league as per the XG ratio numbers from February onwards, with only Argyle worse.
Set piece FC.
And that's it. So the set piece thing I'm not overly concerned about. I think that when you've got Will Vaulks in your side and now Jack Curry in your side, and you've got Michael Elek in your side, you're probably going to score quite a lot of set piece goals from long throws and from corners and everything else. I think that will probably continue. The bigger concern for me right now, and this might change in the coming days and weeks, is that firstly, whether or not our defence can hold up the same kind of numbers at the back end of last season. I think we're probably lacking a bit of pace at centre-back in particular, where if it is, like Kieran Brown's out injured for the moment, if it is Elliot Moore and Michael Elek, I think on the turn, that's you're susceptible to a bit of pace there. But it's more that our attacking play in open play last season was really poor. Part of that maybe is that Mark Harris isn't the most prolific, but I don't think it was really his fault because our ball progression was really bad. Like we couldn't really find ways to get the ball into dangerous areas. We didn't really have the wide players to create chances. Dakir Smacker in midfield will help that because he is a good passer. Like he's good at breaking down play and then getting the ball forward early. But we need some quality in terms of other strikers to compete with Harris and Bradshaw. We need some players that can pick a lock. We probably need some quality out wide. And right now that isn't there. So, in my mind as an Oxford fan, even though we finished 17th last season, right now, given our budget and given the difficulty of being a low budget team in the Championship, if we finish 21st, now I probably won't be happy during the season, but if we get there at the other end, I think it's probably a job well done. And then hopefully, because there's a big decision being made on our new stadium in a couple of weeks, and hopefully if and when that's approved and there's spades in the ground, then other future transfer windows, given the wealth of our owners, might be completely different when they can budget for some kind of stadium income. So I just think this season might be a season of consolidation rather than pressing on. And as such, I struggle to see, I can see more reasons why we'll be embroiled in a relegation battle than not at this moment in time. And I very much hope that I'm wrong.
Not an ideal pre-season, I would say, on a few different fronts. And we'll probably discuss that in more detail on Monday pods at the start of the season.
I wouldn't mind a couple of weeks in Indonesia on holiday, but as a pre-season tour, maybe not the best.
Not if they treat you...
In monsoon season.
Especially not if they treat you like a godlike figure as they treated Gary Rowett. And look, fair enough, finally someone giving him the credit he deserves for a pretty excellent managerial career up to this point. Finishing above Oxford, we got a team who finished 20th last season in PNE. We reckon staying up again, but maybe only just again, and that reflects where we find them at the moment in the Championship. Yeah,
Preston stayed up last season on final day. So the kind of where we see them going into the season is relatively low. And then you look at the players that they've lost. In Kane Kessler-Hayden, they've lost a right back who has been signed by Coventry and is being seen as being a natural replacement for Van Elek, who's moving to the Premier League. And you see Coventry fans and generally FAL fans saying like, well, he's a perfect replacement. Well, if Van Elek's going to the Premier League, then does that make Kessler-Hayden basically Premier League quality? Possibly, because last season at Preston, he was so important to them. Sam Greenwood also goes back on loan, it was a good creative player for them and somebody who offered something in the final third that they're currently lacking, I would say. Freddie Woodman goes. I think his time at Preston come to an end, once very highly rated, but I think his loss is kind of mitigated massively by Daniel Leverson returning after a couple of good loans, and that's probably an upgrade. Watmore and Ledson won't be seen as massive losses by Preston fans, but they played quite a lot of minutes. Emil Rees is probably the one where, yes, he didn't do it consistently enough, but he was their main striker. And at the moment, I'm not really seeing, Michael Smith comes in to replace him. I'm not seeing that as a huge upgrade, as big a fan as I am of Smith. And I think his, the target man style of his game is good. But in terms of goal scoring, I think there's a real lack of goal scoring threat there.
I do think if you blend him and Osmajic together, it should work a bit better as a combination than Rees and Osmajic, just because Osmajic's blistering pace in behind is his main asset. The rest of his game, there's not a lot to it. And I think Smith and Osmajic could work quite well.
I don't disagree.
You probably can't expect Smith to play 3,000 minutes, and there's not much else up there.
And also, you're looking for reasons why Preston are going to be much better than last season to avoid being a relegation scrap again. Like we have them one place outside this is where they finished last season.
Yeah.
Jordan Thompson comes in, who obviously offers that kind of out of possession work rate that Ledson had with a bit more technical ability. Jebbison's the other player they bring in a search for goals, but any Watford fan will tell you that he should not be playing Championship football. I'm excited to see how he gets on reunited with the manager Paul Heckingbottom. And then Afai is the one who looks like a really good buy. He was good at Blackpool last season, a very mobile player who'll suit the kind of three at the back system they play as one of the wide centre backs with Lindsay and Gordon, who'll be on the right. Lindsay and Gibson on the left, Lindsay in the middle. But, as I say, struggling now to find reasons why there's going to be a massive improvement. I think the appointment of Heckingbottom for a time last season looked like that was going to be the reason, that was going to be the catalyst. But then, the underlying numbers back end last season weren't great. The results weren't great either. So in order to predict that Preston are going to be well clear of relegation, you've got to be seeing something that I'm not seeing at this point.
We've got Blackburn finishing in 20th. Now, this would be a huge drop from last season, where Rovers finished 7th. And had they beaten Sheffield United on final day, it was a 1-1 draw, and they took the lead, they would have made the playoffs had all the other results finished as they did. The story of the season is kind of weird, really. John Eustace was their manager, was doing a fantastic job, and he left them in February inside the playoffs to join Derby, who were 21st at the time. Valishmel took over. After Eustace left, they got 2 points from 8 games. It was a tremendous drop-off. And then they picked up 4 wins in 5 heading into final day to give them that opportunity before drawing at Bramall Lane. So pretty bonkers, quite hard to get your head around in some ways and work out what this team's true level is or was outside of just knowing the league position finish of 7th. So Ishmael goes into his first full season. It's obviously the 4th club he's managed at championship level. I still don't have a particularly strong steer or whether Ishmael is a net positive manager in the championship, a net negative manager in the championship, or probably the truth, somewhere in between. And I think fans of the clubs he's managed will give you differing views on that. They've lost some experience in Danny Bart, in Andy Vyman, players that Eustace loved. And in fact, both have joined Eustace at Derby. Rankin Costello, versatile player, but couldn't stay fit to perform consistently. And Tyrese Dolan, who I think is a big miss and was a big part of the way that they attacked in particular. They were excellent in transition last season, one of the most exciting counter-attacking teams to watch. And losing Dolan, that could be a challenge for them because he was so often at the heart of those attacks. They've added McLaughlin from Hull, solid centre-back for the level. And then Ishmael trying to dial up the athleticism intensity, which has been a big feature of his teams. Deneve is a speedy left-sider. Alabiosu is a speedy right-sider. Tavares is a very athletic midfield player. All of these are coming from leagues which are not as difficult, not as strong as the Championship, and there's big question marks about their ability to adapt, if you like. But that's who they've brought in. And Ohashi, moving into year 2, I'm pretty excited about. Finished the season strongly, started the season strongly. Maybe we'll do better kind of understanding the level and the schedule, but a great finisher with good movement. Igor Tyjon is a 17-year-old attacker. Apparently Arsenal are sniffing around at the moment. And I wonder if Rovers, in order to try and keep him and get him to Rovers long term, might be offering him some first-team football, which I'd be excited about. So why 20th? I think finishing 7th was a huge overperformance of budget, of squad ability, of squad depth, and of underlying performance data. I don't think Blackburn Rovers were necessarily the 7th best team for most of last season. So is Valishmel's tenure going to go well or not? That's a big question here. Not sure. Is Rudy Justed a good head of football operations for Championship level, a good operator? I'm not really sure at this point. But mainly, is everything okay with the ownership situation with the Venkies? Because they have one of the lowest budgets, one of the lowest attendances in the league. The Venkies have been under financial scrutiny in India with ongoing court battles for a while now. And when Rovers are finishing 7th in the league, you don't hear that much about it. When they're on a poor run, it starts to rear its head a lot more. The fans know that the situation isn't great, and it's the sort of thing that I think is a big red flag if things don't start well. For me, it feels a bit like with Sheffield Wednesday, you get the really extreme ownership situations. With a club like Blackburn, you get how I would describe the air being very slowly let out of the balloon. That's how I see it. And I do think it means that they're up against it, basically, in Championship terms. And last season was a huge overperformance. So I think they might struggle this season. 20th is where we got them.
In 19th, we have Charlton Athletic, which it feels like Charlton are the kind of the main movers over the course of the summer, where initially they were seen, as often playoff winners in League 1R, as being the outsiders of the lot. And then some eye-catching business means that suddenly people are like, oh, could they be the dark horse? And I think maybe, but like 19th place finish in safety is generally pretty good for a team getting who've been promoted out of League 1 through the playoffs. And as will be a theme, I think, through the podcast, I'm pretty willing to kind of sell the quality of League One as a league last season, where I think in the past we've had teams coming up from League One who've been like rock solid Championship sides coming into it and have shown that. Whereas I think the quality at the top end of League One compared to the Championship last season maybe wasn't the best, obviously barring Birmingham who won it by so far. Charlton have made a lot of eye-catching signings, and Charlton have got Nathan Jones in charge. I think one of those is a huge positive, where I am I'm a fully fledged member of the Nathan Jones cult, right? Where I think when he does turn the clubs that he's kind of gets his teeth into his kind of an image of himself, and he gets buy-in from his players and buy-in from the fans, it's a really powerful thing. It happened at Luton over 2 spells. It did not happen at Stoke. It did not happen at Southampton, partly because of time, I would say, and because, it nearly didn't happen at Charlton, where in Christmas time last year, it felt like he was going to get hounded out then. And then quickly, when, the penny dropped and everyone bought in, and the rest is history. They were brilliant at the back end of last season. But this is a very different level. They've gone really hard after top end League One 24-25 talent. And that worries me for a couple of reasons. The team I support, Oxford, kind of did this last year. We went out and bought Idris El Mazouni, didn't really look up to it, and he's now back out in League One at Leyton Orient. Signed Peter Kioso, who was brilliant at Peterborough, didn't really look up to it. I doubt he's going to play much of a part this season. Secondly, they've gone after a lot of players who've just had a kind of a big breakout season. Like Charlie Kelman, was seen as not good enough for QPR this time last year, having not scored many goals in his career so far, has an incredible campaign at Orient, and they spent a lot of money to bring him in. Now, obviously, for 1-24 purposes, the amount of money spent is irrelevant. So let's just look at him as being someone who you've bought after a breakout season. Of course, he might go on and do it again, but I'd say it's quite a big risk to be bringing in someone of that little sample size to do it. And also stylistically, I'm not convinced that he's a perfect match for Nathan Jones. You look at Godden last season, who's able to both do the goal scoring but also the physical work as well, and the running and the strength. Kelman, very much a player who, yes, he will drop in and pull wide on the ball, but won't offer you that same physicality. Rob Apter, who you and I were so excited about going to Blackpool, I wouldn't say he necessarily performed for Blackpool as we expected him to. Olafe at Stockport, who's a player who clearly offers the physicality I was talking about a second ago up front, but isn't the most polished player, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets found out from a technical level of the Championship. So, a bit of a risk. And then you look at the personnel at the back, are the likes of Macaulay Gillespie and Lloyd Jones and Thierry Small, are these guys who were so integral to such a good defence at League One level. How does that translate? Is that purely Nathan Jones and his mindset able to get to maintain that defensive prowess? Or when they come up against a completely different quality of attacker, is it going to be difficult? So, as I say, Jones is a big positive. The form from last season was really good. I think they will still be solid enough, and that's why we don't have them lower. But safety this season, and then look to build. And I'm not completely sold on the business.
In 18th place, we've got Wrexham, and here we have an unprecedented situation, genuinely unprecedented in English football. A triple promotion has been achieved, and Wrexham and Phil Parkinson are now in the Championship. They've got Southampton up first in the league. And in April 2023, George, so 2 years and 4 months ago, Wrexham lost to Halifax in a league game on the same weekend that Southampton lost to Manchester City in a league game. In a couple of weeks' time, they take each other on, and it just shows how far they've come and what an incredible story it has been. They already had a big squad, Wrexham, and they've been ambitious in their recruitment at every level up to this point. What it means is, as you keep rising and the players that you bring in every season are sometimes somewhat left behind by the club status in the pyramid, is that you need to turn players over again. And I think they've been finding it quite hard to shift players. That's not hugely surprising. They've still got quite a big squad. Only really Paul Mullin has left that was in any way someone who played minutes last season. They haven't lost very much from the core of the team that came second in League One. They have added some pretty eye-catching names. Lewis O'Brien, probably first and foremost, 26-year-old, peak age, brilliant for Swansea on loan last season, has been brilliant in the Championship basically every time he's played at this level. Josh Windass, only a couple of players scored more goals than Josh Windass in the Championship last season. They got him on a free after he left Sheffield Wednesday. Ryan Hardy, Good goal return for a Plymouth side that struggled for 2 seasons in the Championship. Good outlook, good pace, in behind, love it. George Thomason stepping up from League One, where he's been a good player for Bolton in midfield for the last couple of seasons. Libby Kakachi, the Kiwi left back, left wing back, left centre back, number 10. Can't wait to see this guy. He comes from Empoli, 24-year-old, looks like a really interesting player. And heavy rumours as we record that Nathan Broadhead might be the next big name player to come in. So clearly some pretty eye-catching transfer business, and that is where a lot of people just end their 1-24 research. They've signed some players that I have seen and I know, and therefore this team are going to be very, very good. But I think there's a lot more to it than that. I think 18th is the ceiling for now. I'd be really fascinated to see what Phil Parkinson's standard starting 11 is going to be, and very interested to see whether his tactics will change at all. In League One, they had some of the best players in every position on the pitch, and they played a fairly long ball style that worked incredibly well. For years, people have been saying you can't keep playing that way as you go up the pyramid. And I do genuinely believe that at Championship level, being anywhere higher than 18th playing that way is incredibly difficult. Yes, the recruitment is eye-catching, but I would say there's probably still only about half a dozen players in this squad that I think are clearly Championship quality right now, definitively. And mostly they're the ones that I just told you they've signed. Most of the existing squad, I think, are pushing League One quality at best. Some of them will step up fairly well. Much of them are pretty experienced and they're unlikely to perform terribly. But I don't think the level of this squad is particularly strong on paper for Championship standards. And it's worth remembering, they've come up 3 years in a row. It's almost impossible for them to have a squad that would be built, have 20 Championship players in it, because most clubs at this level have been able to build out squads over the course of a few years while playing at this level. So they're at a disadvantage in terms of time taken to build a Championship squad. Okonkwo has been the best shot stopper in League One and in League Two for the last 2 seasons since he played for Wrexham. And that papers over some defensive cracks. So if he can be the best shot stopper again in the Championship, they will do pretty well defensively. If not, I wonder if they might struggle a bit more than they have done. Phil Parkinson, the manager, no one's ever done what he's done. 3 straight promotions, an absolutely sensational job. He has an objectively poor record as a manager in the Championship. He's won 26 of 141 Championship matches, 0.82 points per game, minus 115 goal difference. He's got a lot to prove at this level. So I think they're really hard to place, Wrexham, personally. We underestimated them last season and they outperformed our expectations. No one's ever done triple promotion before, and I cannot wait to see what they add to the Championship. We think they're going to finish 18th.
In 17th, we have QPR, who are under new management. Martí Cifuentes is no longer, after an extended period gardening. He's now in charge of Leicester City. Julien Stéphan is their new manager, who looks like a bit of a coup on paper. He did initially a pretty good job at Rouen and at Strasbourg in France, before kind of both times it tailed off a little bit, but initially kind of very, very good starts with both. In assessing them, last season they finished 15th. It probably wasn't the season that QPR fans were expecting after that incredible half season under Cifuentes initially, where they came out the relegation zone and rose up the league. They started poorly the back end to the beginning of last season before sorting their defensive shape out and improving. They've lost a few key players, I would say. Like Ronnie Edwards' loan was very successful. Koki Saito was an exciting player off the right-hand side as well. Yang was good at the back end of the season too. Jack Colback, Anderson, Morgan Fox. These are players that probably needed to move on, but still played quite a lot of minutes last season. Kenneth Parle, I know his popularity dwindled towards the end of his time there, but played a lot of minutes at left back and always looked pretty good to my eye. Obviously, no loss in Charlie Kelman, and I do wonder if, to them, given that he didn't ever play for them, and given that the relationship between him and the fan base wasn't great, and I do wonder if now the Kelman sale has gone through, if we might see a bit of a shift in spending. And that initially came around when Ruben Borrell signed for them after a remarkable 12 months, where he goes from Cove Rangers to Burton Albion to QPR. So from Cove Rangers to the Championship in 12 months or so. He's a player that you and I have liked and have spoken about a lot. He's obviously rapid, and whether or not his good goal scoring can translate from League One to the Championship, we will see. I really like the signing of Mbenge, who had a great season at Reading last season, and Kwame Poku comes in. And this is what makes QPR really kind of nuts in my head, and I can't really work out what's going to happen, is that they've got Kwame Poku, they've got Karamoka Dembele, they've got Ilias Chair, they've got Paul Smith. They basically have an attacking quartet, of which probably 3 will be on the pitch at most times.
Be the most fun team to be on FIFA this year.
Yeah, like
EAFC.
just small dribblymen, basically. But what's also interesting is that they will be surrounded by strength and physicality. You know, you've got Frey up front, you've got Varane, Madsen, Field all in midfield. So like it could kind of work in a way where like it's
one of the most delicious blends of brawn and artistry that we've ever seen at this level.
I mean, they haven't replaced Pal yet. I'm excited to see the 19-year-old Escadinha, who they brought in, I think in January. Ziad Lakash was at Dundee last season. It looks like they probably need to bring a left back in. They've got quite a lot of quite fun options up front in Burrell, in Frey, Ryan Coley, Alfie Lloyd, and of course Zansalar, who didn't work out last season, but you know you wouldn't write him off. So I'm intrigued to see it. Too many doubts in my mind at the moment. You know, we need to see what the new manager's about. We have to see how it's all going to kind of fit. Obviously, having Burrell in, given, you know, as I mentioned, Kelman didn't really get a game and was out on loan all of last season, gives him a new like attacking threat, and he could be very good. Like there's no doubt about that. But yeah, similar-ish to last season seems to be the way this is going to go in my mind.
Stoke finished 18th last season. We've got them 16th this season. Similar-ish to last season.
Yeah, finally we've stopped putting Stoke. I think we joked this time last year that it was the first year we'd put them quite low down, and this was going to be the year they were going to do it, and they didn't. Where are we on Mark Robins? Because it's funny how a managerial profile can kind of go from being, he was so routinely called the most underrated manager in English football that he then became one of the most highly rated, like, rightly so because of the job he did at Coventry, and then Coventry just. That goes so wrong so quickly at the beginning of last season. Having been touted for Premier League jobs by everybody, including us, he then ends up at Stoke, which is kind of a graveyard for managers, and didn't make a huge impact in the second half of last season. And we're still kind of yet to see him do it without his right-hand man at Coventry until last summer, Adi Vivesh. They finished 18th. They finished 2 points above the drop zone. They've lost their best player in Wouterberger. Moran and Kumas, who are both good loanees, have returned from their loans. I do quite like what they've done in the transfer market. The return of Ashley Phillips is massive. He was huge for them last season. I don't think Stoke fans thought they'd be able to get him back. Maxi, the player who came in, the defender who came into Argyle in January, looked really good under Muslic. He's a nice bit of recruitment, a proper kind of defender. They brought in two new strikers in Robert Bosnick from Boavista, who we know very little about, but I'm really excited to see Divin Mbama, whose profile, both in terms of the West Ham Academy and also Manchester City Academy, has always been very high, and good to finally see him playing. And Sorba Thomas comes in to provide some quality out wide. They've got young players who I feel are rapidly improving. Million Manhoof, I think, is well set to have a proper kind of breakout year relatively soon. It wouldn't surprise me if this is it. He's someone who I think will suddenly catch fire. Really attacking fullbacks as it stands with Chamado and Bocat, which concerns me a little bit, given the, you know, I think it's all well and good having really attacking fullbacks when you dominate the ball and you dominate games, but Stoke at the moment aren't doing that. Bosa Lawal, I think, is one who I'm excited to see this season. He had that really good loan at Fleetwood and then last season hit by injury, but Mark Robins has come out in the press in pre-season comparing him to Franz Beckenbauer, which is quite fun. So it's one of those where it's like I can find some positives. I don't think they've replaced Wouterberger, who was their best player. I like Manhoof, but I'm worried about their fullbacks, and I'm not sold on Robins at the moment. And for those reasons, it's hard to see why this is the season where finally Stoke get it right.
Yeah, he's the sixth different manager to lead Stoke into a new campaign in the last 8 seasons since they came down from the Premier League. All I really care about is that we just have a calm season of Stoke City where they allow a calm manager who knows what he's doing to manage the team for a whole year and see where they're at. And I think things could go better than we've predicted if they do that. But yeah, there needs to be some seeing before believing when it comes to Stoke. In 15th, we've got Middlesbrough. Now, this would be a drop of 5 places. Borough finished 10th last year. And I think probably a feeling among fans that was a low point, basically as low as Borough could feasibly get at the moment in the Championship. And we don't agree with that. Michael Carrick left after a few years in charge and what was a disappointing campaign. And they've turned to Rob Edwards, who takes them into this season. Edwards, obviously formerly of Luton, very briefly of Watford and of Forest Green as well. Last season, they really tailed off. The second half of the season was terrible. And I personally don't think that the manager, Michael Carrick, was like the sole reason for that, and that removing him and replacing him with Rob Edwards fixes loads of the issues. When it comes to players that they've lost, not loads at the time of recording. They got pretty good money for Josh Coburn, and they'll feel good about that. It's heavily reported that Hayden Hackney, the hometown hero and exceptional young midfielder, will be moving on, and they will get another big transfer fee for that. So as they have done for a few years, Borough are doing pretty much better than anyone at bringing in transfer fees, and player trading from a purely financial point of view is going very, very well. Surely they should have quite a lot of money to spend, you'd think. So far, only Abdoulaye Kante, midfielder who's come over from France, and Alfie Jones, solid centre-back for the level with Hull. Only those two have come in.
Callum Britton, strongly linked.
And Callum Britton, strongly linked.
Strongly.
One thing that's interesting, you mentioned Adi Viviash, Mark Robbins' former assistant. He is Rob Edwards' assistant here, and he's got such a positive standing in the game. That feels like it could be a really good thing for Edwards. So why 15th? Well, what I perceive to be pretty serious squad issues aren't fixed by a change of manager, in my opinion. I think their goalkeeping department is nothing special at best. I think their centre-back department is fairly well stocked, lots of recognisable names, quite a lot of experience, and of course in Vandenberg, someone that will also probably make them quite a lot of money when he's sold. The centre-backs should do better as a unit in a better structure, and Carrick never achieved finding defensive solidity with this Borough team and finding that balance. But Edwards has had a pretty mixed success with that as well. His Forest Green team were very solid. His Luton side that he took over from Nathan Jones were very solid. But his Luton side last season in the Championship were really poor out of possession, and the defenders really struggled with what he was asking them to do. It looks like he's going to be playing 3 at the back formation, which is what he played at Forest Green, which is what he played at Luton as well. I don't think this squad suits that at all at the moment. So there's, in my eyes, tons of work to do if that's the shape they're going to play. The fullback/wingback department looks very weak. And if you're going to play that system, you really need your wingbacks to provide a lot of attacking output. They need huge improvements in that area for me, if that's the shape they're going to play. In midfield, Morris is class, brilliant signing. If Hackney goes, he hasn't got a huge amount around him, but I'm sure they'll bring players in. The front line, I'm not a massive fan of, to be honest, either individually or their blend as a unit. They're really poor in the second half of last season. It didn't work at all. They didn't put enough pressure on the ball at the top of the pitch, and going forward there were flashes but nothing more than that. I'm not as high on Conway as some are. I think Azaz is a good player and a good team, but outside of that, in the wide areas, attacking midfield areas, there's not that many players that I'm particularly sure of. And with the Hackney sale, I guess we expect some big signings to come in, and I'll be excited about that, and that might have a big difference on my outlook when it comes to Borough. But it is getting quite late now to add 4, 5, 6 starters and pick up points and a decent lick at the start of the season. So maybe a new voice and a new style and a new approach will get Borough back towards playoff chasing, which should be the expectation, really. But I don't think it's a top half squad right now, and I don't personally think Edwards guarantees anything necessarily within this cohort of Championship managers. He's done some great jobs, but is there anything about him as a manager that makes me think he's going to be one of the best managers in the league this season? Probably not. So yeah, 15th is the bottom end of where I thought Borough would finish in our predictions, but it's not just about the team you're talking about and the team that you're placing, George. You build a picture of all the other teams in the league, and the context of those teams that we have finishing above them is crucial here too. Bristol City are 14th in our predictions. They finished 6th last season. Now, how do you follow up your best finish in 17 years? You get your manager poached. And not only that, poached by a club that finished a good half dozen places below you. Liam Manning has gone to Norwich. And so we have Gerhard Struber back in English football, the former Barnsley.
Welcome home, Gerhard.
Yeah, welcome. Willkommen. Willkommen home, Gerhard. He is the first managerial appointment that Bristol City have made in an off-season since the summer of 2010. which is quite interesting. In terms of the way I'd sum up the summer business, in terms of player recruitment, not much lost and not much added either. They've lost Nicky Wells, who played quite a lot of minutes at the top of the pitch. They lost George Earthy, who had a good loan for them last season. And they've gained Adam Randall, Plymouth Argyle midfielder, and Emil Rees from Preston, as well as a couple of goalkeepers, with O'Leary missing the start of the season with an injury. So the major change is in the dugout, and with Struber, I think his appointment and Manning's departure makes it very hard to know where to place them. Like, potted history of Struber since he left English football, he's managed New York Red Bulls, Red Bull Salzburg and FC Köln last season. He had them on the precipice of promotion in the Zweite Bundesliga, and he got sacked with a couple of games to go because the owners feared a bit of a wobble. So they binned off Struber. They won promotion anyway, and he wasn't there to take them up, which seems kind of insane, but I don't really have the whole picture there. I think that Randall should be a nice addition to the midfield. I think at the top of the pitch, I'm a bit unconvinced about the consistency of their attacking players. The main concern, though, is that Manning had this team massively overperforming its talent level and its underlying numbers. So some sort of regression seems likely here, even if Struber is a perfectly good appointment. I don't think their attacking options are great, as I've said. And look, he could be a good manager and it could still be a bit of an awkward transition, or it might be exactly what the squad need in terms of such a different personality and playing style to Liam Manning. We will see. And I always think that there's a chance, if things don't start well, that some of that chuntering will pick up again, the Bristol City fans towards the owner, towards the people that make the decisions at the football club. That could have lift-off once again, and that wouldn't be a positive thing, really, for the team. So Bristol City, 14th.
What do you do with a team when you have no idea where they're going to finish?
Right in the middle of the table.
13th.
Perfect.
Watford, last year's 24th place in this very podcast, who made a mockery of me early in the season before picking up the 24th most points in the league in the calendar year. It's all changed at Watford again, as ever. We have a new manager in Paolo Pezzolano. We don't know a great deal in terms of how his managerial talent will translate to the Championship. He
guarantees promotion, I heard.
He follows Ronaldo around, which I think is probably quite a good career decision. Like that, one of the best players ever. I think it's going to hang on to your coattails and see what happens.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Ronaldo owns Cruzeiro in Brazil.
Yeah.
Appointed Pezzolano as manager. He took them back to the top flight in Brazil.
Get in.
Ronaldo owns Valladolid.
Yep.
He appointed him as manager of Valladolid. He took him back to the top flight in Spain.
Get in.
So twice he's taken teams back to the top tier, albeit I'm led to believe what happened when they got there wasn't quite so good. But either way.
Did it in Uruguay as well.
There you go.
There you go. Before he even met Fenomeno Ronaldo.
He is, how do you know they didn't meet?
They hadn't met. Trust me.
He is the guy to turn to if you want to get a team out of the second tier into the first tier.
Who do you think introduced them?
Rivaldo?
No, it was me.
Bebeto. So, yeah, I mean, I think with last season, it's quite easy to find concerns. Numbers not great, results not great. The back end of the season felt like things were spiraling a little bit. In terms of pure intrigue, with talent coming into the club, I think Watford are up there with probably the most interesting. We've got we've got the obligatory loan from Udinese, a player who's brought from the Danish second division, in Luca Kierkegaard, who was bought by Udinese and sent straight on loan to Watford. They have to do it. I don't know, there's something in their contracts to suggest that's a joke, by the way, before I get sued by the Pozzos. And then Vivaldo Semedo, also on a loan from Udinese after a spell in the Portuguese second tier. Otman Marma from Montpellier, Nestori Irankunda from Bayern, who seemingly has all of Australian football fans incredibly excited by his talent. Let's see it. These are all really young players who've shown in the infancy of their careers they have immense talent. What I would say the caveat to that is how many young players do we see brought into the Championship who we're quite excited about and then either don't look great or basically don't really play. Like the hit rate for these kind of signings is relatively low, especially in terms of making a good early impact. Quite often we'll see these players, Watford have a great record of it. They've brought in some amazing players in the past, Chapatadze, their current player, being one of them, Joao Pedro being one in the past. But quite often these players will come in, it's too early. There's every chance that Irankunda will be a great player in 3 or 4 years, but whether or not he can impact games in the Championship now, we don't know. Abankwah back on loan is obviously very good. He was impressive last season. Cipriano should be pretty steady in the middle of the park. Nathan Baxter comes in goal. His stock relatively low after last season at Bolton, but we know that he's a good shot stopper. Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of the old players who, Matty Pollock is still there, had a good season last season, albeit went off injured in a friendly, and Ngakia at fullback. Kayembe's still there, Lou's still there, Kwadwo Bar's obviously really exciting, Rocco Vata's exciting, both had decent seasons last season.
I feel like the excitement of the fan base is as much to do with the fact that Louza, Chatvatadze and Bar are all still Watford players as it does the new signings.
I think from an individual personnel perspective, the squad is really fun. But that doesn't always necessarily, especially young players, translate to a kind of a well-oiled winning football machine. And that's going to come down to Petzolano. So they're the one team where if Watford finish 24th next season, I'm not surprised. If we're talking about Watford as being automatic promotion challenges, I'd be more surprised, but still, I could probably see it. Like, if these guys are all really good, it could happen. So, yeah, 13th, because I just have no idea.
The Hornets have got a bit of buzz about them. Let us tell you quickly about the NTT20 universe, because we are EFL until the earth explodes. And that's not just on the podcast feed. It's not just on the YouTube channel. There's way more that you can get involved with if you are as obsessed with these leagues as we are. Podcast every Monday, the Monday pod, recapping the weekend in Sky Bet Championship, League One and League Two. Every Thursday, The Betting Show, a preview of the weekend with betting picks from George and myself. There will be bonus episodes as well, as and when during the season, such as episodes of our manager interview series, How Do You Manage? And the YouTube channel has all of the podcasts as well, shot in this lovely studio that we're in right now. And on the YouTube channel, we have separate videos for each league on a Monday. On the pod feed, it is all one massive EFL mashup. So if you like sticking pods on the TV, or if you want to see George's expressions when I do some cringy, poetic intro, go for it. You can stick them on the TV. You can watch through YouTube. If you like reading, well, guess what? We create the best EFL writing on the internet on ntt20.com. It's run through Substack. We're actually the 30th biggest sports Substack in the whole world right now. And if you're a paid subscriber, you get minimum 3 pieces a week, but often more than that. That includes weekend notes on a Monday morning. That involves feature pieces. That involves bonus podcasts, Dear Ali and George, where you can ask us any question you want, football or otherwise, and we'll answer it. But also the best EFL transfer coverage that exists online as well. We're still a month of the window to run. It's £7 a month or £72 a year, which saves you about 15% on the monthly if you want to be a paid subscriber. But free subscribers get 1 piece a week to read as well. NTT20 Squad is our private forum for the biggest fans of NTT20 Pod and the biggest EFL lovers. Basically a community of around 200 of the sharpest minds. And the best part of the squad is everyone's nice, everyone's friendly, everyone's supportive, everyone's interested. They want you to share what you think about your team. They will ask you questions about your team and encourage you to do the same. It is the absolute opposite of what most social media sites have become, and it's a safe place and an enjoyable place for EFL fans to come and talk about these leagues. There's pod chat on there, behind the scenes stuff. There's a separate thread for each division, a separate betting channel as well if you're into that. There's one for transfer news, there's one for the England pod, there's one for non-league, there's a channel for pretty much anything now. And it's either £5 or £8 a month, depending on which subscription you choose. Links for NTT20.com and the NTT20 squad are in the show notes. See you there. Give us a go.
Welcome to the top half. This is it, where the fun starts. Although I have a feeling this team and fans of this team may hope they'll be a bit higher than 12th. It is Ryan Mason's West Bromwich Albion.
Yeah, they finished 9th last season. The story of that season, I guess, involves Carlos Corberán as a main character. He left them on Christmas Day for Valencia. At the time, they were playoff adjacent, I think level on points, but just outside on goal difference. After Corberán's departure, West Brom had only the 14th best record after that. That included a Tony Mowbray tenure that did not last very long, and the season very much petered out. So from petering out to Ryan Mason in. He's only 34, Ryan Mason, but has been coaching for 7 years since having to retire early, all within Tottenham Hotspur. He's had all sorts of roles. He even took them as a caretaker once or twice.
Same age as me.
He is much loved. And he's highly rated, and now he gets his first go as a senior manager. The owners, the Bickle Football Group, they inherited a pretty tough situation here, and they seem to be working through it prudently and sensibly, But it means there's not been loads of player turnover. They've lost John Swift, Grady Diangana, Shemi Ajayi. Nothing huge except maybe, some wages that they're probably happy to shift. And they've brought in Aoun Hegebo, who scored a lot of goals for Brann in Norway last season. They brought in Nat Phillips. They brought in George Campbell, a defender from MLS. So a couple of additions, but not loads. I'm really excited for Tom Fellows for obvious reasons. I'm really excited for Isaac Price, who they signed in January, and I think looks really, really good. Ryan Mason could be anything, really, couldn't he? We just don't know at this point. He could be a complete breath of fresh air in the sort of Kieran McKenna mould, or he might find it quite tough, as first-time managers often do as well. We've got them 12th. Personally, because I think Carlos Corberán was the main reason that this club was a playoff challenger for the course of a few seasons, and he left. And I don't think the squad has taken a huge leap forward. I wouldn't say any area of the pitch is hugely standout, except arguably centre-back. More sales have been discussed by the owners as potentially being necessary as well, and they don't have that many assets other than Tom Fellows. So for me, it's basically an average team, and I mean that in the literal sense. That's what we've put them in the middle of the table. The average league position out of 24 is 12th. Don't come at me, mathematicians. And I think if they finish higher, it will mean a job well done by Ryan Mason.
Sorry, just having an existential crisis about being the same age as the West Brom manager. Let's talk about Portsmouth now, who we've got in 11th, who are, I think, kind of the generally perceived dark horses of the Championship this season. And with good reason, because they started last season quite poorly. But by the end of the campaign, I think by basically any measure, they were a top 10 team. Their results were very good. The numbers were good. And it's not hugely surprising to see that, because they're a progressive club with Rich Hughes in charge of the transfer dealings, who does things a bit differently and does things very well. And in John Mousinho, who is currently one of the most exciting and frustratingly probably for Pompey, hireable young British managers, where my only worry is that I think if Mousinho carries on Portsmouth's rapid progression, he's going to become incredibly sought after, I think, by any, if one of the relegated sides from Premier League don't start well, or bottom end Premier League sides, if they're up towards the top end of the division, given where Pompey have come from, I think he's going to be an attractive prospect. They haven't lost players of huge note from a permanent perspective. Yengi, Saidi, Towler, all kind of squad options. The issue is maybe in loans, where Rob Atkinson came in January on loan and was really good. Freddie Potts came in on loan over the season and was strong. Isaac Hayden had a good loan at the back end of the season too. Those are three key players for them in their good spell at the back end of the campaign. And they haven't done loads yet in terms of bringing players in. John Swift is an interesting one, where obviously at Reading he was a brilliant goal scorer and creator. He kind of lost that spark towards he started well at West Brom and lost that spark towards the back end, possibly because, as you say, maybe it wasn't particularly suited by Carlos Corberán's attacking style. But then a couple of players I'm excited to see. Luke LaRue comes in, who looks like he's going to be a kind of real ball winner in the middle of the park, a big physical presence. Segacic comes in on loan from Australia, where we know that Portsmouth like to shop and have had mixed success probably in terms of their Australian recruitment, but that's probably always going to be the case when you're shopping in different waters, fishing in different waters, I should say. Mark Koznovsky comes in from Budapest. Again, we don't know a great deal of him, but it's more in terms of the players that are still there that for me are so important. It's not a coincidence that Colby Bishop, who missed the beginning of last season with a heart issue, his return to the side coincided with not only Portsmouth becoming a much better team, but also Josh Murphy showing what he was all about. Surely the signing of the season last summer in the Championship, a player that I still believe is probably, in terms of pure talent and ability to win games, as good as it gets at Championship level. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he is a standout player in the league in the coming season. Callum Lang's been linked to a move away. It looks like he's currently staying. Maybe some concerns in terms of personnel at the back, like Shaughnessy, Ogilvie, Poole. You'd think at some point Pompey may want to upgrade on those players, but
it's more like the depth beneath them as well at the moment.
Exactly. Well, So
Shaughnessy and Poole are both having had injuries previously.
You almost want to bring in players above them in order for those players to become kind of part of a bigger unit rather than the players.
But then you don't want to upset the apple cart of a core group of players that have taken them on a hell of a journey over 2 years. That's what I find fascinating about Pompey right now. So you can see, I think it's about half of their signings out of the last 18 or so have come from overseas, but only Schmid has made his way into the first team yet. Yeah. So there's a lot of players who, hopefully after a period of adaptation, whether they joined last summer or in January or this summer, might start challenging the status quo at Pompey. But I guess they're fortunate that even if they don't, they currently have a core that they must be pretty confident in because of what they've done over the last 2 seasons.
For sure. next up, we have, well, I've got a side now that I had quite high and you had quite low, and then we've got a side that you had quite high and I had quite low. So this is kind of...
Nice look behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll get into that more on the NTT20.com bonus podcast, George and Ali's 1 to 24 biggest arguments of the 1 to 24s.
Exciting.
That is an episode that actually
Heated.
does exist. If you want to become a subscriber of NTT20.com, you can listen to it.
Swansea, we have in 10th, who finished 11th last season. So maybe it shouldn't be a huge surprise, but they obviously had a difficult start to the campaign, had a very weird, long managerial recruitment process that ended up with Alan Sheehan, the caretaker, getting the job, which is always a bit of a concern. But Rich Montague came in, who is the Notts County Director of Football, and he's now, or sporting director, has the job at Swansea. And I've really liked what they've done in the transfer market, because if you look at probably the two players who've been like the most important players and have been everything that Swansea have been about since Russell Martin came in a few seasons ago, Harry Darling at centre-back, who's now gone to Norwich, and Matt Grimes in centre midfield, who left in January to go to Coventry. Now, I know, because I spoke about Grimes on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, that the perception amongst Swansea fans by the time he left was he's not that good anyway. And because they were quite good in the second half of the season, it's now we're better without him. I don't really buy that. I think Matt Grimes is a very, very good technical player who played an incredibly important role for Swansea over the last 4 or 5 seasons. What I would say is that Luke O'Brien was a very, very good replacement for him, although a very different player, but played really well for the second half of last season. He's obviously gone back from his loan at Swansea and is now a Wrexham player. So, he is a loss. But the players they brought in, I think Ethan Galbraith, despite playing at right back for Leyton Orient last season, will come in and play the Grimes role really, really well. Someone who's so calm in possession, is also a progressive and creative passer, really tidy on the ball, very much a championship player who shouldn't have been playing in League One. Cameron Burgess comes in and offers way more of a kind of defensive-minded approach to defending than Darling. And I think that has to be a good thing for we've seen Swansea at times over the last couple of seasons under Williams and under Martin not being the best defensively. They're being linked to Richard Kone up front, which should be interesting. Vopotnik is someone who I think, he's still very young. He had an okay first season at Swansea last season, a physical striker. And then you look at their defence, and they've got Vigouroux in goal, had a great season last season. Cabango to go alongside Burgess, Timon and Key at fullbacks, Franco to be alongside Galbraith in midfield. Really exciting attacking options, and Ronald, Eom, and then Anusa, who's kind of the headline signing, who I'm really excited to see they brought for 6 million or so. Are we lacking goals? Possibly. They might mitigate that with Kone. Are we lacking depth? Yes, I think they are. It's a small squad. One concern is that caretaker's getting the job on a full-time basis off the back of a good run in charge can often go very badly, and it's often the result of variance which cause the manager to get sacked in the first case. And that could be the case here. But I think Swansea very much have the first 11 needed to be a good side this season, and again they can knock on the door for the top 6.
In 9th we got Derby County. They finished 19th last season, so this would be a leap of 10 places and more progression for the club after they won promotion from League One to the Championship 12 months previously. John Eustace was an inspired appointment. When he left Blackburn, they were 5th and Derby were 21st. Derby then had top 10 form after he joined and conceded only 14 in 14 goals. Now, they only scored 15, but they got the job done and stayed well clear of relegation by the end of it. He's lost some quite important loanees that were a big part of the last part of the season in Yates and Harness and Phillips, Harrison Armstrong as well. And it's been an interesting sort of blended approach to recruitment where Eustace has been able to bring in some guys that he's worked with before in the form of Danny Bart, Andy Vyman, Owen Beck, all at Blackburn Rovers. Carlton Morris comes in, stays in the Championship after relegation with Luton. Will be a good target man, you'd think, for Eustace. But also Patrick Agyemang, a big outlay on an exciting young American attacker from Charlotte FC. Really looking forward to seeing him play, but he does arrive having just had hernia surgery, so it might be a couple of weeks or even months. So why 9th for Derby? I basically think Eustace is an amazing manager. Like, I really do. I think he's got some of the worst PR of any Championship manager, because I think in terms of his record over the last few years, there aren't many who've done better than John Eustace. He left Birmingham when they were 6th. He left Blackburn when they were 5th. He went to Derby and made an instant impact. None of those clubs had a squad that anyone would consider top 6 level. And I think there's a touch of the Tony Pulis's about John Eustace. And I think some people will see that as a negative comment. And I mean it entirely the opposite way. The way that Eustace boils the game down and simplifies the game and gets incredible buy-in and work ethic, concentration and consistency from players who are essentially so much more than the sum of their parts is what football management is all about. And he gets results as well, even if the style might not be to everyone's taste. I don't see any reason not to believe in him, basically. I think defensively they're likely to be very strong. How much will Morris, Adjumang, Weimann add up top? We will see. You know, in a team like this, Ibu Adams is basically a superstar because of the skills that he has, the strengths that he has are given a platform by Eustace, and his weaknesses on the ball don't matter at all because he doesn't see the ball very often. So, you know, it's not a squad with tons and tons of top half quality on paper, but squads on paper aren't everything. I think it all lines up quite well with the playing style. Eustace gives me confidence. Just want to see him see out a whole season, really, because it's been a few years since he did that. And I think if he does, Derby will go very, very well. In 8th, we got Millwall. This is where they finished last season, and it's another manager that I'm very keen on. Another manager that I think is very underrated is Alex Neil. Now, Millwall are in the middle of a quite remarkable sort of new era, new approach, I think. I spoke about it on NTT20.com over the summer, and I likened it to the start of Brentford's sort of player trading era in the Championship about 10 years ago. And I don't drop Brentford's name lightly. In recruitment terms, this is a similar approach. They had wheels greased, if you like, and pockets bulging after the sale of Romain Essa to Palace and Zian Fleming to Burnley. And with that money, they've broken their club transfer record fee 3 times in 12 months on Ivanovic, on Negley, and on Coburn in 3 consecutive windows. Now, what they're doing isn't easy to do and get right and maintain a high level as you go, because you do lose quality quite consistently. And it's not guaranteed to succeed either. I'm not saying that they will be Brentford, but it's something very different for Millwall, who've previously been quite consistent in their approach. And it was a high floor approach where they've been a solid Championship team for a while, but have struggled to get to that next level. In this way, they are going to try and get to the next level. They've lost George Saville, George Honeyman, hate guys called George, Alex Neil does. But they've added Alfie Doughty, quite eye-catching. Josh Coburn, after a loan last season. Luongo in midfield. Sturge, the left-back, joins, and a couple of keepers as well. I'm keeping a very close eye on this team. I really rate Alex Neil. I think tactically he's excellent. I think they'll have a good out-of-possession approach, which will make them tough to play through. And with Ivanovic and Coburn, plus Negley, Aziz, Bangura Williams, Imaku, exciting young wide players as well, this should cause some problems, although I think it's hard to imagine them being among the league's top scorers. I think they'll be good enough going forward. So I like the approach, I like the business, I like the manager. It's not an incredible squad, and potential for late window sales feels quite high, with Ivanovic attracting a lot of interest and Japhet Tanganga as well, 2 of their best players basically. So I think Neil would do a great job to get them to 8th again, and I think he will.
7th now, we have last year's League One champions Birmingham City, and it's hard to really know where to pitch Birmingham, because obviously the ambition of the owners, the good feeling amongst the fan base, the incredible points tally last season, especially given what Ipswich did, what Sunderland did before that, where they finished in the top 6 the year after they were promoted in the playoffs. There is a pathway where sometimes elite League One sides can go and compete at the top end of the Championship. The reason why we don't have them in the top 6 to start with, because I personally think this is a relatively positive prediction, I'm pretty positive on Birmingham next season, even if the position doesn't necessarily suggest that, aligning with some perceptions of them being amongst the best. It kind of reminds me of like a horse race, where you've got a race where one horse on the bridle, untouched by the jockey, has just gone 20 lengths clear. And you look at that and you're like, well, visually that was incredible, but like, what have we actually learned? Because what were the horses like in behind? Mm-hmm. And in last year's League One, I'm not convinced it was particularly competitive. Like when Ipswich came second in League One, I mean, they should have won that league, as we've spoken about a lot in my mind, but they had a really good Argyle side and a really good Sheffield Wednesday side keeping them to account. And even though, respect to Wrexham, respect to Stockport, respect to Charlton, I don't necessarily think those teams would have finished where they did in previous League One renewals, when maybe there were more sharks in those waters. Chris Davis had his first season in charge, and to win a league in the way that he did, you cannot find the negative in that. This is going to be a very different assignment. They are probably still going to dominate the ball in most games, but it won't be just a case of, can we break down a low block, full stop. In terms of players out, Ben Davies had a really good loan. He's gone back. Alfie May's been sold after kind of doing his job of scoring League One goals, which is what he's bought for. Really interesting transfer business. James Beadle in goal is a keeper that I really rate after his period with us at Oxford, who Sheffield Wednesday fans really rated to start with, and then seemed to kind of turn against him. And he's got something to prove again for the first time in his career, fresh off winning the Under-21 European Championships. Tommy Doyle and Aaron Cashin are, to me, the headline ones. They're the two where you know what you're going to get. Both have been standout players at this level. Both have their best years ahead of them. Both want to play in a way, I think, that will be suited by Davis's management style. I'm not really having Damari Gray. He's been in Saudi and he hasn't really done anything there. Bright Samuel should be a decent attacking fullback option at right back. Phil Newman, we don't know much about, tall centre back. And then Fujimoto, a creative midfielder that we know on the board is very good in terms of physicality, how he deals with the league. We'll have to see. Christoph Clara was their standout defender last year in League One. It wouldn't surprise me if he, under more scrutiny, especially in transition, if he doesn't quite have it his own way as he did last season. Iwata and Pack in midfield are obviously very, very good. Not massively sold at the moment on their wide options. Not massively sold on Jay Stansfield either. 9 open play goals last season wasn't a huge return for the fee. And then Kyogo, who's the striker they bring in with a ridiculous goal-scoring record at Celtic. Huge reputation within the game. A really poor move to France.
Yeah, he was in the January. Bermuda Triangle for 6 months, wasn't he?
Yeah, basically hasn't played football. And this is one where he could feasibly be in a really good attacking side, a goal-scoring phenomenon. Or it could just be the case, as we've seen before, that goals in Scotland don't actually translate that well. And playing up front for Celtic in Scotland is actually a very, very good way for someone who's got some predatory instincts and finishing ability to score loads of goals. We will see. They've obviously got a stacked squad. They've obviously got a lot of players who we expect will do well and very deep pockets to strengthen again. I just, compared to some of the other squads in the league that we're going to talk about in a second, still too many unknowns to kind of go fully in and say, yeah, they're going to just continue the way they were and they'll be one of the best teams in the division. It wouldn't be a massive surprise if they do it, but I'm intrigued to see how they get on under Davis with a slightly different, more difficult assignment.
6th spot, playoff spot, Norwich City. Liam Manning, fresh off overachieving with Bristol City and taking them into 6th, while Norwich themselves underachieved. Manning is poached. He's the Norwich manager, born in Norwich. Bit of history with Ipswich Town. Forgotten. Nice story, this. 3 seasons since relegation from the Premier League. They finished 13th, 6th, 13th. They got new owners, full-time. Mark Atanasio has full control now. And it's time to get serious, because I don't think this has been a very serious team for a couple of seasons. I think they've been incredibly poor overall after Premier League relegation. This club should be amongst the best of the rest, certainly when they had parachute payments, but even without them, they should be among the top of the sort of mini league, if you like, if you take out the 3 that are coming down from the Premier League with the odds stacked in their favour. So they should be challenging for 6th. And I think Manning's a good appointment to make them a serious team once again, because he is, in many ways, one of the most serious managers in the Championship. I don't think he's going to be someone, maybe like the team was last season, that looks great when the sun's shining at Carrow Road and you're 3-0 up against bottom half fodder, but bends under the slightest challenge. That was basically the story of last season. And Norwich decided not to go for year 2 of the Torup process. They're going to go down the Manning path. Now, they've lost Borja Sainz, who was the second top scorer in the Championship last season. They lost Callum Doyle, who was an excellent loanee. They lost their keeper, Angus Gunn. And possibly they will lose Josh Sargent, who I think is the best number 9 in the Championship. But as of now, he's not going. And I think the deal that I saw that maybe was happening with Wolfsburg is now not happening. So we shall see. They brought in Jacob Wright permanently. He came in January. Man City youngster, who I'm seriously excited about. They signed him permanently. And I think it's the sort of business that might look very, very smart in just a couple of months, basically. New centre-backs, Harry Darling and Jakov Medic. A new goalkeeper in Vladan Kovacevic. New attackers in Matthias Kvistgarden and Papa Diallo. 10 million quid spent across those 2 players. And Jeffrey Schlupp's here as well to fill in at left-back. and to help be a mentor for some of their very exciting young fullbacks. So tons and tons of interesting young players, signings from overseas. You've got the British fullbacks like Kellen Fisher and Lucien Mahovo, who I'm excited about. Wright, I just mentioned, really exciting young English number 6, the sort of type we don't produce very many of. And then at the top of the pitch, you got Schwartau, you got Cernats, you got Kvistgaard, and lots of stuff that appeals to me as someone who likes young talent. But most importantly, Liam Manning. Pretty pragmatic, and I mean that in a very positive way. A manager who generally just finds ways to make his team better, and sometimes they're not that flashy, but they're almost always pretty effective. I doubt I'll enjoy watching Norwich matches as much as last season, from a neutral point of view, but they are very likely to be a better team, in my opinion. I think the new goalkeeper and new centre-backs are quite important here. Will that make them more solid? It remains to be seen. I'm going with yes. And the top of the pitch might be pretty unproven if Sargent goes, but I'm not that fussed about losing Sainz, to be honest. And Manning's attack, George will know from his Oxford days, it rarely focuses on individuals. It's more about the team unit, the out-of-possession unit, and his teams tend to score just about enough to make the most of a strong defensive record. So Norwich, in my eyes, should be among the best of the rest. That's where we've got them in 6th spot. In 5th, George, the team that finished 3rd last season.
Yeah, Sheffield United, who finished 3rd after a 2-point deduction last season. And it's all changed there. Chris Wilder, who I think we should credit with the amazing job of getting them 92 points on the board, 90 points in the table last season. And for a long time, they look like they'd be automatically promoted. Now, assessing their squad this season, I would say kind of after any Wilder reign is quite weird, because with Chris Wilder, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but by the end of seasons, his squads, I would say, are normally quite bloated, because he kind of goes wild on loans, and especially in January looks to recruit loads. So if you're looking at players who were kind of involved in the first team when they were there, who've left their loans, you've got Britton Diaz, Chowdhury, Suter, Holding, Gilchrist, Jezrin Raksaki. But even with those players gone, it's still a squad pretty stacked with depth. The one big loss is Vinny Souza, who, I think he's been sold £15 million, a midfielder who, again, shouldn't have been playing championship football, did it for a season, looked very, very good. That's mitigated to an extent by the fact that Ole Arblaster will be back from injury. Him and Sidney Peck in midfield should be really fun, should be really good, 2 young quality players. And it almost feels like Arblaster's injury meant that Peck was able to play a lot of minutes, and now they kind of both come into the team having played a lot of first team minutes and can do so together. Other players they brought in, Tyler Binden comes in, who I think will be a kind of depth option. They're being linked to a couple of other players, but Louis Barry's the one who I'm very excited for. If he can stay fit, I see no reason why his skill set off that left-hand side or through the middle shouldn't translate pretty well to championship football, especially for a team who I think we can expect to have the run of a lot of games. Ruben Sayers is the manager. Now, this is one of those where if you just kind of keep up to date, you support your team, you read the papers, you'd be like, what is going on here? Why is the guy that got sacked from Hull suddenly turning up as Sheffield United manager? I think it's incredibly unfair. It doesn't really tell the whole picture. The job he did at Reading was incredible. I think the job he did at Hull, given he was appointed mid-season and was, tasked with keeping them up, he kept them up. Yes, it wasn't particularly convincing, but I also think often when you're kind of a process-driven manager, it's quite difficult to do exactly what you want to do, and it's normally a case of kind of playing the cards that you're dealt. He's someone who's, I think, will be very, very adept at bringing through young talent, of which there was quite a lot at Sheffield United. And then you look at the senior players that are still there, whether it's Ahmed Hodzic, Harrison Burrows, Gustavo Harmer, player of the season last season in the Championship, Callum O'Hare. We don't know what's happening with Kiefer Moore, with him being linked to a move away, but if he's there, he's a massive asset. Tom Cannon is kind of the forgotten man. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he's their main striker and scores a lot of goals next season. So, yeah, I can see kind of bits of negativity around Wilder leaving and certain individuals leaving, but actually it's still a very good championship squad, loads of whom were key members of a championship side that got over 90 points last season. And I personally don't see Sayers as a huge or in any way a negative, albeit obviously Wilder's departure could mean that if things don't start well, Sayers will come under pressure earlier than maybe other jobs. But yeah, I don't see any reason why Blades shouldn't finish in the top 6 at the very least.
Coventry City, 4th place prediction. Last seen suffering heartbreaking playoff defeat in the semi-final. The last minute of the semi-final, Dan Ballard's header for Sunderland. That was a semi-final in which Coventry had kind of huffed and puffed and tripped themselves up, basically, with the goals they conceded in the first leg. and then conceding from a set piece right at the end, having got themselves back in it just before penalties. It was a 5th place finish in the regular season after such a poor start, spelled the end of the Robins era. It felt like a really uncertain time for the club, and instead they just flew. They absolutely flew under Frank Lampard. From December onwards, comfortably the best of the rest, outside of Leeds and Burnley. Their results were actually on a par with Sheffield United in that time, second half of the season. So Lampard came in with Joe Edwards as his assistant, and they had a really, really good impact in terms of results. So now they're looking to take basically the same group to another level. This is certainly one of the least amount of transfer business and squad churn that you'll see in the Championship. In terms of outgoings, Binks has left. It was a sort of centre-back depth option. That's about it. So far, they've only added Kane Kessler-Hayden, who was Preston's player of the season last year. Looks like a really good addition, particularly if they're going to sell Van Evik this summer. But if Van Evik stays, I think there'll be ways in which Kessler-Hayden can still impact things. Brow is a left-back, left wing-back. That's been an area they've been trying to upgrade without success for a while. It's a squad with great options in attack. You've got Sakamoto, Mason Clark, Haji Wright, Ellis Sims, Norman Bassett, Brandon Thomas Asante for 3 positions, basically. In midfield, you've got Grimes and Sheaf and Torp and Eccles and the star Jack Redoni in the number 10 spot. You've got Van Evik and Kessler-Hayden, both really good attacking right backs as well. Rushworth in goal has come in. I think that makes sense on a loan because Dovin picked up that injury just as he'd established himself. It was a really impressive first few months in charge, first 6 months from Frank Lampard. So why not higher than 4th? Why not upsetting the status quo and winning automatic promotion? But I feel like I want to see Lampard show off another level of tactical acumen before I really believe that Cov could be one of the 2 best teams in the league. I want to see him evolve the team and particularly the way that they attack, not just do more of the same. Because by the end of the season, their patterns and methods of attack were still fairly strong and fairly effective, but they were quite predictable and increasingly so. I think the continuity approach is fine, but they only won 4 of their last 10 regular season games. So they didn't maintain that incredible form right until the end of the season. They definitely need to improve defensively if they're going to go to another level. But the mixture of Lampard's style of play and the defensive personnel that they have makes me unsure that they can make that step. Maybe there'll be a marquee centre-back signing. That wouldn't hurt. Then you've just got this sort of style question of if you have Grimes at the base of midfield, who Lampard clearly loves, but you have a group of attackers who mostly thrive playing into space and with a bit more space to play into transition play rather than possession play, low block stuff. Is that a great blend? We will see. I think Cov will be a really good team, really dynamic, good to watch, 4th place. In 3rd, we've got Leicester City. They've come down from the Premier League. George, last time at this level, they won the Championship with Enzo Maresca, currently world champion manager, Enzo Maresca. The Premier League didn't go well. First Steve Cooper, then Ruud van Nistelrooy, and then the summer was a bit of a mess. Van Nistelrooy eventually let go at the very end of June. In the dugout now, Martí Cifuentes, appointed on the 15th of July. But
very different to Enzo Maresca.
Yeah?
Well, yeah, in terms of playing style and outlook. I mean, what's funny about this? Often when we do the research, there are teams that really surprise you. And quite often it's one of these teams that comes down from the Premier League and there's this perception that they're like a basket case. It was the same with Burnley and company. It was the same with Leeds 2 years ago where there's so much like negativity. And then you sit down and you look at the squad and you're like, oh, yeah, no, they've actually probably got the best squad in the whole league. And with Leicester, we don't know what the points deduction is going to be. Okay,
we don't know that there will be one.
We don't even know there will be one.
Very little clarity about pretty much everything when it comes to Leicester right now.
So Sky Sports News' Rob Dorset said about a week or so ago that he believed it was going to be 9 points. Mm-hmm. So that seems like it's going to be in the vicinity. But presumably, if Leicester's lawyers get their way, it could be 0 points. I think for the purpose of this 1-24, we've gone with kind of somewhere between 6 and 12 points. So 9. And if we were doing this from a pure points per game basis, I think I'd make a case for them being 1st or 2nd. Because, yeah, sure, I mean, Cifuentes comes in. I think he's very, very steady. I think in terms of what he's done at QPR, it's hard for me to see why Leicester aren't going to be rock solid, especially when you consider their defensive options are Okoli, Fass, Vestergaard, Nelson, who had a brilliant season on loan at Oxford last season. Victor Christensen's their left back, who was bought for 17 million last summer.
Player.
Like, effectively, their squad, apart from Jamie Vardy, who retired, is pretty much the squad they had when they came up from the Championship, with £100 million spent in the summer last summer. Like, of course, some of those players are going to leave. El Khanous is one who's been linked to a move away. But even when you consider the players that are still there, Pereira, Ndidi, Samare, Skip, Winks, Fatawu, Mavadidi, like, these are players who were elite at this level not so long ago, and yet they've kind of been forgotten about. They haven't done any business yet. It's been reported this morning by our friend Joe Donoghue, who's a Leeds reporter, that Josh Brownhill's been offered a contract, which would be obviously a phenomenal signing after his campaign last season. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm finding it really hard to work out why this squad of players, obviously off-field might be an issue, they might not have any money, everything else, but they've got this group of players together. They can probably afford to sell 2 or 3 for big money and still have maybe the best squad in the league. They still finished with the most points of any of the 3 relegated sides last season. They got 13 more points than Southampton last season. Yeah. So, they're the ones for me where if they don't get a deduction, I think they might win the league.
They've only got one senior striker at the moment in Patson Daka, but obviously, as you've just laid out, a very strong starting 11 and some change as well. The off-field stuff is just hard to measure how much impact that'll have on the actual team. And I think you're right. I think we've learned over the last few years that generally it can be overstated at this point of the season.
Especially when parachute payments are a thing. If they don't go up this season and suddenly you're looking down and they've got 2 more years, then let those go, then maybe it's a fire sale. But it also means it's absolutely essential for their owners that they do go up.
And the other thing I would say is the gap between the teams coming down, or rather just the gap between those who have challenged at the top of the Championship in the last couple of seasons, and I'll include Ipswich in that, who had come up from League One. So it's not just the teams that come down with parachute payments, but it mostly is these teams. They have been so good on average, ignoring Luton last season, to the point where last season, 3rd place, Sheffield United finished 16 points above 4th place and 22 points above 5th place. The season before, Leicester finished 10 points above 4th and 22 points above 5th. So there's that aspect of like, oh my goodness, they might get a points deduction. And you're like, yeah, but if you take the trends of the last few seasons, they could be deducted 10 points and not move down more than one place, which is just kind of crazy. I don't think they have the star quality of Southampton and Ipswich. I don't think they have the likely coherence of Ipswich with McKenna having stayed, so we've got them in 3rd. In 2nd, we've got Southampton. They finished 20th in the Premier League last season. They got 12 points from 38 games. It was horrendous. Russell Martin had taken them up through the playoffs, but didn't last that long in the Premier League. Sacked in December. By March, he was joining Carra and Dave Jones on Monday Night Football. 1 month after that appearance, they were joined by the Lens manager, Will Still, who was an excellent guest, as was Russell. And a month after that, he was appointed Southampton manager. Russell Martin is now the Rangers manager. So Will Still, the youngest manager in the EFL, and, time for me to get existential, as far as I know, the first ever EFL manager that's younger than me.
Oh my goodness.
Tough scene. Really tough scene.
They've so much younger than me.
They've lost Kyle Walker-Peters. They've lost Aaron Ramsdale. Not a lot else. They've added Damian Downs, a young American striker come over from Germany. They've signed Joshua Kwashi, who's an absolute colossus of a centre-back, and more to be done, you'd think, towards the end of the window. These clubs that come down generally do their business a lot later, and quite often the team that starts on opening weekend is like only half the same team that makes the most appearances in the season. For me, the best case scenario here is very, very, very exciting, and I am buying into it. I think from what I know about Will Still, and ignoring all the memes and all the hype, that the manager himself is incredibly impressive. I don't think he would be at this point, age 32, if he wasn't. I don't think the hype and all that social media stuff plays into it at all. His results have been really impressive at multiple different clubs. This isn't the case where a young manager has got his teeth into one team and done really well and then got a big move off the back of that, when he's only ever had one example of a club situation to work in. Still's done it for different clubs. And I think his way of playing is perfect for the modern championship. Not a possession zealot. He is an out of possession guy. He is an intensity guy. Lots of different ways of scoring goals, but an onus on being incredibly intense out of possession. I think that works. So I'm expecting a much more exciting brand of football for the neutral. I think in midfield, they've got so much strength. Flynn Downs, Matthias Fernandes, Shea Charles, who I think will be the star of the league. Plus,
surely Fernandes is leaving.
Maybe not.
Atletico Madrid, amongst the teams who apparently want to buy him for £50 million. If he stays, then I'd like to revise. And Dibling's the other one who, like, at the moment is there, but surely, like, Villa and Everton, the two teams, kind of mostly being linked to him.
Yeah, loads of strikers: Damian Downs, Cameron Archer, Adam Armstrong, Ross Stewart, Samuel Edozie on the wing, Ryan Fraser, whether or not Dibbling stays or not. There's lots of things to be very excited about. Centre-backs all over the show, including Ronnie Edwards and Taylor Harwood-Bellis, who are two of England's best under-23 centre-backs. But, you know, there's a dose of reality needed here, George. I'm getting a little bit overexcited about Will Still and Saints.
I just think you can't get away from the fact that they were such a poor side last season, and they are going to lose. I mean, you mentioned, you know, Carl Walker-Peters was a huge part of that Russell Martin team that got promoted out of this league. I'd also say Bednarek is a pretty big loss in terms of him being arguably their best centre-back last season in the Premier League. Bazunu comes back in as number one.
I think they'll buy a keeper.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. It will be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, it's just the concerns that, you know, of the three, they were the poorest. I'm really excited to see Still. I guess, I mean, my notes here basically say, like, how they get on probably depends on how good Will Still is. Like, it's hard to see them being really poor, but if he is, you know, if we're going to sit down as we did with, you know, Bielsa's Leeds or Company's Burnley, and with this first Southampton game, we're like, okay. And it's obvious when you can just see, like, an incredibly well-coached team.
Yeah.
That might be the case with them, especially because Still came in relatively early. So, like, I'm really excited to see it. I'd probably have them in points per game, like third of the relegated three. But with Leicester, like, having a deduction, we've got them second. But as I say, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they are a very different side to last season.
We've picked the winner correctly in 5 of the last 6 seasons in the Championship. And this time round, it's Ipswich Town we are anointing as league champions. George, double promotion from League One to the Premier League and then relegation back to this level. Why are they going to win the Championship?
It's a very different Ipswich to last time they were here, where they had this huge squad of players and they were kind of stockpiling strikers. Now it feels like it's a much smaller group, and I think there's more business to be done. But they've got Kieran McKenna, firstly, who this time last year, seemingly, or 13 months ago, had his pick of the Chelsea job, the Manchester United job, the Brighton job. He is one disappointing season in the Premier League, given the task at hand doesn't impact, in my mind, how good McKenna is and what he's able to do. Secondly, this is the 11 itself, and probably the 18, the first team in the subs, is a much, much better side with more quality in it than the team that he took up 2 seasons ago. If you look at the players that they recruited last summer, whether that is Dara O'Shea or Jacob Greaves or Amari Hutchinson or Sammy Smodics or Jaden Philogene or Jack Clark, it's an unbelievable levelling up of what they had previously. And then the key players from that team that came up a couple of seasons ago, Leif Davis should be the best left back in the league, as he was last time he was here. They have Hurst up top, who's a brilliant target man for that buzzy trio of players in behind to play off. We probably want some more depth in terms of their striking options. I think that might come with Broadhead seemingly off to Wrexham. But again, Wes Burns on the right hand side, Connor Chaplin is the deputy number 10 behind Smodics. There's a lot there in terms of players that have come in. Azor Matasiwa, seemingly a really good physical midfielder who'll replace Sam Morsey, who's moved on. Of course, we had that Morsey. We had the Morsey Luongo kind of pivot in that promotion season. Matasiwa is seemingly going to be joined by Hayden Hackney, and that blend of physicality and ball progression is absolutely incredible for the level. And again, a levelling up on what came before it. It just feels to me, and we know that Ipswich aren't shy spenders. I'm sure more is going to come in terms of padding out the squad, but just in terms of the actual personnel they've got, and that, there's obviously talk of Hutchinson possibly leaving, but even if he does go, you've got Jack Clark on the left-hand side, you've got Philogene, you've got Small or Chaplin at 10, you've got, so many players there. I am I can't really see a reason why they won't improve on their points tally from 2 years ago. And if they do, then they're probably going to win the league.
I think it says a lot when the main concern is like, might there be some sort of hangover? Might the fact that this is a different challenge for Ipswich, they're not the darlings that have come up from League One and are sticking it to the big boys. No, they are now the big boys. Can they handle being the big boys? I think they probably will, but we'll see. You know, we were burned by Luton last season, who came down with an air of like, yeah, don't worry about it, guys. We were expecting to come down. We planned for this. Look at all the players we bought for this exact scenario. And they got relegated. So I don't think that is a big enough sample size to say anything like that will happen to Ipswich. I'm not that worried about it, but it is worth pointing out the sorts of things that could just cause some awkwardness, some issues, whatever the case may be. But we think this is the team ready to dominate and win an interesting championship renewal. We hope you've enjoyed these 1 to 24s. It's always a pleasure to bring them to you. We've got the same episode out for League One and League Two, wherever you've listened to or watched this. And if you get to the end, I think at the very least, it'd be worth subscribing to the channel if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribing to the podcast feed if you're listening in that way. Thank you for joining us, with a big thanks to Sky Bet and the Sky Bet EFL Building Foundations Fund for sponsoring the NTT20 podcast, both this episode and for the whole 25-26 season. We'll be back on Monday with a recap of the opening weekend across League One and League Two. Go well.